An arrogant and powerful man throws a basket with newborn triplets inside from the top of a bridge into the icy river waters. A fisherman sees the scene from afar, thinking it's trash, but when he realizes what it is, he's horrified. Those helpless children fall into the water, and it seemed like the end for them. But suddenly something happens that will change everything. If you appreciate stories that touch the heart and reveal the extraordinary strength of human kindness, subscribe now to our channel so you don't miss any inspiring narratives that can transform your day. The morning mist hovered over the dark waters of the Willow Creek River like a silver veil, creating an almost ghostly atmosphere that June morning. The silence was broken only by the gentle sound of the current and the creak of oars from the small wooden skiff cutting through the smooth surface of the river. Sam Peterson, at 77, had maintained the same routine for over 5 decades. His calloused, experienced hands guided the boat with the precision of someone who knew every rock, every bend, every secret of those waters. Grey hair escaped from under his faded straw hat, and his blue eyes, still lively despite his age, scanned the surface for the best fishing spots. That morning, however, something was different. A strange feeling, almost a premonition, accompanied each stroke of the oars. Sam stopped the skiff near the old stone bridge that connected the 2 banks of the town of Havenwood, a place he had always considered special. It was there he had met his late wife, Mary, more than 50 years ago. It was there he had caught his first fish at the age of 6, accompanied by his grandfather. The sound of a powerful engine shattered the morning. Tranquility. A black car gleaming like a mirror stopped in the middle of the bridge. Sam frowned, puzzled by the presence of such a luxurious vehicle at that time and place. Instinctively, he guided his skiff closer to one of the bridge's columns, partially hiding in the shadow. A tall man emerged from the car, wearing an impeccable, dark suit that contrasted sharply with the rural setting. His posture was stiff, arrogant, and even from a distance Sam could perceive the coldness in his calculated movements. The man looked around, making sure he was alone, before opening the trunk. Sam's heart nearly stopped when he saw what the stranger pulled from the vehicle, a wicker basket covered with cloths, from which emanated sounds that made his blood run cold. They were cries, babies' cries, not one but multiple, overlapping in a desperate symphony that echoed through the valley. "Good Lord," Sam murmured, his hands trembling slightly on the oars. "What does this man intend to do?" The answer came, cruelly and immediately. Without hesitation, without a moment of apparent doubt, the man in the suit lifted the basket over the bridge's guardrail and let it go. The impact with the water produced a dull thud that reverberated in Sam's chest, like a punch. The basket floated for a few seconds before beginning to sink slowly, weighed down by the water seeping through the wicker. The cries, now more desperate, mingled with the sound of the current that began to drag the makeshift vessel downstream. Sam didn't think. He didn't calculate. He didn't weigh consequences. 50 years of life on that river had molded reflexes in him that operated independently of reason. His experienced hands propelled the skiff through the water with a speed surprising for someone his age, closing the distance between him and the rapidly receding basket. The man on the bridge had already returned to his car and was driving off, leaving only a cloud of dust and the distant echo of the powerful engine. Sam, entirely focused on his rescue mission, didn't even notice the stranger's departure. The current was stronger than usual due to the previous week's rains. The basket bobbed dangerously, already half submerged, when Sam finally reached it. With a careful movement, he pulled it into the skiff, feeling the significant weight of the accumulated water. When he removed the wet cloths covering the basket, Sam had to grip the edge of the skiff to keep his balance. It wasn't 1 or 2 babies, as he had imagined from the cries. There were 3. 3 tiny human beings, all clearly newborns, thinner than normal, their skin reddened from the cold and hunger. "Good heavens," he whispered, feeling tears well up in his tired eyes. 3 little angels. How could anyone be capable of... He couldn't finish the sentence. The magnitude of the cruelty he had witnessed was incomprehensible to his simple, kind mind. The babies were still crying, but now their cries seemed weaker, as if their little strength was ebbing away. Sam quickly examined each of them, 2 boys and a girl, as far as he could tell, All were extraordinarily small, with clear signs of malnutrition. Their clothes, once white, were now wet and soiled, but it was when he looked more closely that he discovered something that perplexed him even more. On the right shoulder of each baby was an identical birthmark, a small, dark, star-shaped mark, perfectly defined. Sam had lived long enough to know that coincidences like that were rare, very rare. Triplets, he murmured, shaking his head in amazement. Triplets with the same mark. The old fisherman knew he needed to act quickly. The babies were cold, hungry, and clearly needed urgent medical care. But his simple mind was torn between two worries: how to care for 3 malnourished newborns, and what to do about the horrific crime he had witnessed. As he rowed towards the bank, Sam looked again at the baby's birthmarks. Something about that shape felt familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. Living in that small riverside town his whole life, he knew practically every family and their peculiarities. Distinctive birthmarks were the kind of thing people talked about and remembered. "First, we'll take care of you, little ones," he said aloud, as if the babies could understand him. "Then we'll find out where you came from, and why someone did such a thing." The skiff gently touched the earthen bank near Sam's house. It was a simple wooden structure, painted a faded blue, with a small front garden where Mary had grown her favorite flowers. Since she passed 3 years ago, the house had become too quiet, too large for one man alone. Carrying the basket with extreme care, Sam climbed the wooden steps that creaked under his feet. The front door, which he never locked, after all, who would rob a retired fisherman, opened with a familiar groan from hinges that had needed oiling for months. The inside of the house smelled of solitude and memories. Simple but well-kept furniture, yellowed photographs on the walls, and a silence that would now be broken by the cries of 3 little lives he had just saved. Sam placed the basket carefully on the kitchen table and lit the fire in the wood stove. His hands, which had handled nets and hooks for decades, now trembled slightly as he heated water to prepare something to feed the babies. "Mary," he murmured, looking at his wife's photograph on the wall. "If you're watching me from wherever you are, help me know what to do. These little ones need more than this old fisherman can offer." It was then he heard footsteps on the front porch, followed by a soft knock on the door. Sam frowned. Who could be visiting him at this hour of the morning? "Mr. Peterson, are you in there?" The concerned female voice on the other side of the door was familiar. Mrs. Eleanor Ellie Vance, the retired nurse who lived next door, had a habit of checking on him, especially when she noticed unusual activity. Sam glanced quickly at the 3 babies in the basket, then at the door. Ellie was a trustworthy woman, someone who had dedicated 40 years of her life caring for people at the small local clinic. If anyone could help him in this desperate moment, it would be her. "Come in, Ellie," he said, unlatching the door. "You've come at just the right time." The 66-year-old woman, grey hair pulled back in a neat bun and wearing a flowered housecoat over her pajamas, entered with curiosity etched on her face. Her expression changed dramatically when her trained eyes immediately identified the situation. "Good Lord, Sam, where did these babies come from?" Ellie approached the basket, her experienced hands already instinctively assessing the children's condition. "They're hypothermic and clearly malnourished. We need to act fast. I pulled them from the river, Ellie. I saw a man throw them off the bridge like they were trash." Sam's voice was thick with restrained emotion. "They're triplets, and look at this." He showed her the identical birthmarks on each baby's shoulder. Ellie examined each one with growing attention, and Sam noticed her expression change from concern to something that looked like recognition. "Sam," she said slowly, "I know that mark. I worked as a private nurse at the Blackwood Estates about 5 years ago when the old patriarch was ill. The entire Blackwood family has that birthmark. It's like a sort of family crest." "Blackwood?" Sam frowned. The Blackwood family was the most powerful in the region, owning land that stretched for miles, with political and economic influence that reached the state capital. "Yes, but this doesn't make sense," Ellie continued, grabbing clean towels from Sam's cupboard. "The patriarch died 2 years ago, and his children, well, the youngest, Richard, was always trouble. The daughter, Marcia, disappeared a few months ago. They say she went to study in Europe, but... She paused, as if connecting pieces of a puzzle. While they talked, Ellie had begun to care for the babies with the efficiency of decades of experience. She dried them carefully, checked their basic vital signs and wrapped them in towels warmed near the wood stove. "They need baby formula urgently," she said. "And proper clothes. Sam, do you have any money saved? We're going to need a lot of things." Sam went to his room and returned with an old coffee can where he kept his savings. It wasn't much. His fisherman's pension barely covered his own needs, but it was all he had. "Use whatever is necessary, Ellie. These little ones didn't ask to be here, but now they're our responsibility." Ellie counted the money quickly. "It'll be enough to start, but it won't last long. 3 malnourished babies will need intensive care and special feeding for weeks, maybe months." It was then they heard another knock on the door, this time more vigorous. Sam and Ellie exchanged worried glances. Through the window they could see John Jack Sullivan, the owner of the local pharmacy, standing on the porch with an anxious expression. "Mr. Peterson, I saw Mrs. Vance come over here early and then I heard a baby crying. Is everything all right in there?" Jack was a middle-aged man, known for his quiet generosity and for never asking prying questions. After a brief hesitation, Sam decided to trust Jack as well. The pharmacist entered and, like Ellie, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "My God," Jack murmured, observing the 3 babies. "Triplets? And in what condition?" He shook his head, visibly moved. "You're going to need a lot more resources than you imagine. Special formula for malnourished babies, diapers, clothes, medicine." "Jack," Sam interrupted, "I know I can't afford it all, but these little ones—" "Stop that," Jack said firmly. "My pharmacy has everything they need. You can count on me. And I know a few other people in town who will want to help when they hear about the situation." Ellie, who had remained thoughtful while preparing a makeshift bottle, finally spoke. "We have to be careful about how we spread this information. If these babies are really from the Blackwood family, and if someone abandoned them intentionally, there might be people looking for them." "Looking for them for what?" Sam asked naively. "To finish what they started," Ellie replied grimly. "Someone who is capable of throwing 3 newborn babies into a river won't hesitate to take more drastic measures if they find out they survived." The reality of the situation began to become clearer to Sam. It wasn't just about caring for 3 abandoned babies. There was something bigger, more dangerous happening. But as he watched the 3 small faces, now calmer after receiving their first feeding in hours, he felt a determination grow in his chest. "Then we'll be smart," he said. "But these babies won't suffer anymore as long as I have the strength to protect them." Jack nodded in approval. "I'll get the supplies right now. And I'll talk discreetly with some trustworthy people. Ms. Meadows just moved here. She studied early childhood education, and Dr. Franklin, even though he's retired, can still provide medical guidance." While Jack left to get the supplies, Ellie continued to care for the babies. It was during this more detailed care that she made a disturbing discovery. "Sam," she said in a tense voice, "these babies weren't just abandoned. Look here." She showed small marks on each child's arms. "These are needle marks. Someone was medicating these children, but not to heal them, to keep them weak, sedated." The revelation hit Sam like a punch to the gut. "Are you saying someone was poisoning these babies?" "Not poisoning, but keeping them in a constant state of weakness, probably so they wouldn't make much noise, wouldn't develop normally." Ellie examined each baby more carefully. "Look, despite appearing to be newborns by their size, they have characteristics of babies at least 2 or 3 weeks old. But why would anyone do that? To hide a triplet pregnancy, perhaps? To buy time to decide what to do with them?" Ellie shook her head. "Sam, we're dealing with something much more complex than we imagined." At that moment, the middle baby, one of the boys, opened his eyes for the first time since the rescue. They were blue eyes, clear as crystal water, which seemed to focus directly on Sam's face. For an instant, the old fisherman felt as if that tiny creature was trying to communicate with him. "Well, look at that," Ellie murmured. "He's recognizing you as his savior." Sam extended his little finger, and the baby, with surprising strength, for one so frail, clung to it. In that moment, the old fisherman felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a clear purpose, a divine mission. "It doesn't matter who they are or where they came from," he said in a firm voice. "God put them in my path for a reason, and I'm going to find out what that reason is." Outside, the sound of an approaching car made them both look out the window. It was Jack returning, but he wasn't alone. A young woman was getting out of the passenger seat of his car, carrying a large bag. "That must be Miss Meadows," Ellie said. "Jack works fast when it comes to helping people." But as the morning progressed and more people from the community began to get involved in caring for the triplets, none of them noticed the dark car that slowly drove down the street twice, its occupants closely watching the unusual activity at the old fisherman's house. The search for the babies had begun. Ms. Helen Meadows was only 25, but her brown eyes revealed a maturity that came from facing challenges from a young age. Recently graduated with a degree in education, specializing in child development, she had chosen this small riverside town to start her career, fleeing the pressures of the city where she grew up. When Jack knocked on her door that morning, briefly explaining the situation, Helen didn't hesitate. She grabbed her bag with first aid supplies and knowledge about infant care that she had studied exhaustively in college. "Oh my God," was her first reaction upon seeing the 3 babies. "They're so small, but look at their reflexes." She delicately tested the babies' responses to visual and tactile stimuli. Despite the malnutrition, their neurological development seems normal. "This is a miracle." Sam watched the young teacher work with a combination of technical knowledge and maternal instinct that impressed him. "Do you have experience with babies?" he asked. "Theoretically, yes. Practically, well, I'm learning now," Helen admitted with a nervous smile. "But I studied a lot about early childhood development. These babies will need proper stimulation to recover fully." While Helen examined the triplets, Ellie prepared a special mixture of baby formula that Jack had brought. It was a specific formula for malnourished babies, richer in nutrients and easier to digest. "Have you noticed they respond differently?" Helen observed. "The middle boy seems more alert, the girl is calmer, and the other boy, he has a look that seems to understand, more than he should for his age." Sam nodded. "I noticed that too. It's like each one already has a well-defined personality." It was then they heard the sound of another vehicle stopping outside. This time it was Dr. Arthur Franklin, the town's retired doctor, a man of 71 with completely white hair and a well-kept beard. Jack had managed to convince him to come take a look at the situation. "Jack told me you found some abandoned babies," Dr. Franklin said, entering with his traditional medical bag that he never left at home. "But he didn't tell me they were triplets." The medical examination revealed crucial information. "They are approximately 3 weeks old," the doctor confirmed, "but they were kept in a state of controlled malnutrition. Look at these marks here." He pointed to tiny, almost imperceptible scars. "Regular injections of some mild sedative, probably to keep them calm and weak." That's torture," Helen murmured, her eyes filling with tears. "It's a form of control," Dr. Franklin corrected grimly. "Someone wanted these babies to remain manageable until a final decision was made about them." Sam felt anger rising in his chest, an emotion he rarely experienced. Who could do this to helpless children? "People who see human beings as problems to be solved," Dr. Franklin replied. "Unfortunately, I've seen similar cases during my career. It usually involves powerful families trying to hide inconveniences." At that moment, the girl triplet began to cry, not the weak, desperate cry from before, but a stronger, healthier cry. Ellie immediately went to comfort her. "That's good," Dr. Franklin said. "It means she's recovering. A strong cry indicates healthy lungs and renewed energy." Helen watched the interaction intently. "May I suggest something? These babies need names. Even if temporary, it will help their emotional recovery and also help us organize better." Sam looked at the 3 small faces. "I was thinking about that too. How about Gabriel for the most alert boy, Raphael for the other boy, and..." He hesitated, looking at the girl. "Hope," Helen suggested softly, "because that's what they brought to all of us." "Gabriel, Raphael, and Hope," Sam repeated, trying out the names. "Yes, they suit them." As they organized to establish care shifts, Among all the volunteers, Dr. Franklin pulled Sam into a corner of the room. "Sam, I need to warn you about something important. If these babies are truly from the family we suspect, you could be in danger. Very powerful people might be looking for them." "Doctor, I'm an old man. I've lived my whole life on this river, knew the love of my wife, raised my own children who now live far away. If God put these babies in my path, it was for a reason. I'm not going to abandon them now." Dr. Franklin nodded respectfully. "I figured you'd say that, so we'll need to be very smart about how we handle this." As they talked, Jack returned from the pharmacy with more supplies and worrying information. "Folks, a lady came into the pharmacy asking if anyone had bought baby formula today. Said she was looking for some babies who got lost from the family." The tense silence that followed was broken by Helen. What kind of person describes babies as lost? Someone who doesn't want to admit they abandoned them, Ellie replied dryly. Sam made a decision. "We'll keep the babies here for today, but we need to think of a more permanent plan. They can't stay hidden forever." "I have an idea," Helen said hesitantly. "I know a lawyer in Oakhaven, the next town over. She specializes in children's rights. Maybe she can guide us on how to proceed legally." "And what about registering the babies?" Dr. Franklin asked. "They'll need documents, especially if we intend to seek official help." "First, let's ensure they're completely safe and healthy," Sam decided. "Then we'll deal with the bureaucracy." As the day wore on, the 5 adults developed an efficient routine. Ellie and Helen took turns feeding. Dr. Franklin monitored their medical progress. Jack ensured the supply of resources, and Sam simply remained present, offering a constant, comforting presence that the babies clearly recognized. It was during the afternoon feeding that Helen made an intriguing observation. "Have you noticed they calm down when they're near each other, and that Gabriel always reaches his little hand towards his siblings?" "They've been through a lot together," Ellie observed. "It must have been what kept them alive until now, each other's company." Sam watched Gabriel, the baby who responded most to external stimuli. There was something in those blue eyes that both troubled and comforted him. It was as if that little creature knew exactly what had happened and was trying to communicate gratitude. "You know," he said to Helen, "I get the feeling these little ones are going to teach us more about courage than we can teach them about survival." Helen smiled, adjusting little hope in her arms. "Maybe that's why God put them in your path, Mr. Peterson, to remind us all what really matters in life." But as evening fell, a shadow of concern grew over the group. Through the window, they had noticed the same dark car driving down the street several times. It didn't stop, didn't visibly slow down, but its repeated presence couldn't be a coincidence. "They're being looked for," Dr. Franklin murmured, slightly closing the curtain. "The question is, how long can we keep them safe?" Sam looked at the 3 babies, now sleeping peacefully after a day of proper care. Their faces, once pale and pinched with hunger, now showed signs of life and color. "As long as it takes," he said with determination. "As long as God allows." The morning of the second day brought a different energy to Sam's house. The 3 babies had slept better through the night, waking only for their scheduled feedings. Gabriel had been the first to wake, his bright blue eyes immediately focusing on Sam's face, as if recognizing his savior. "Good morning, little warrior," the old fisherman murmured, picking Gabriel up with increasing care. In just 2 days, his paternal instincts, dormant for years, had returned with full force. Helen arrived early, bringing encouraging news. "I managed to speak with the lawyer in Oakhaven, Miss Patricia Almeida. She wants to meet us this afternoon, but she said we need to be very careful about how we present the case." "What did she mean by that?" asked Ellie, who was already preparing the first bottle of the day. "That if these babies are really from a powerful family, as we suspect, we need solid evidence of abandonment before taking any legal action. Otherwise, it might look like we stole them." The legal reality of the situation was beginning to look ominous. Sam had acted on instinct in saving the babies, but now they faced a complex legal maze that could result in serious consequences for everyone involved. Dr. Franklin arrived shortly after, bringing good news about the triplets' health. "They're recovering faster than I expected. Raphael gained 5 ounces since yesterday. Gabriel is much more alert, And Hope, well, she has an appetite that impresses me. It's true, Helen confirmed, smiling. She eats as if she's trying to make up for all the meals she missed. But the cheerful atmosphere was interrupted by Jack's arrival, a worried expression on his face. Folks, we have a problem. That woman came back to the pharmacy last night just before I closed. This time she was with a man. They asked very specific questions about who had bought baby supplies. What kind of questions? Sam asked, a knot forming in his stomach. They wanted to know how many babies, what age, if anyone had looked for. Formula for malnourished newborns. Jack paused, clearly disturbed. The man offered money for information, a lot of money. Helen instinctively hugged little Hope closer to her chest. They know the babies are alive. Worse than that, Jack continued. The man mentioned that the babies belonged to the family and that whoever was hiding them could face serious legal consequences. Dr. Franklin frowned. That sounds like intimidation. They're trying to scare us into handing over the babies voluntarily. Well, Sam said with a determination that surprised everyone, then we'll just have to be smarter than them. At that moment, as if sensing the tension in the air, Gabriel began to cry. But it wasn't the weak cry of the first few days. It was a strong, healthy cry that echoed through the house like a reminder of why they were facing this situation. Shh, little one, Sam whispered, rocking Gabriel gently. Papa Sam is here. No one's going to hurt you. The word Papa had slipped out naturally, and everyone in the room noticed. Helen smiled through tears she hadn't realized were forming. They're not just babies you saved, Mr. Peterson. They've become your children. And we've become a family, added Ellie, stroking Raphael's fine hair. A family that protects each other. Dr. Franklin, ever pragmatic, brought the conversation back to reality. We need a plan. If these people are actively looking for the babies, it's not safe to keep them here indefinitely. What if we split up the care? Helen suggested. Each of us takes one baby for a few hours in different houses. It would be harder to track. No, Sam said firmly. They need to be together. Have you seen how they calm down when they're close? Separating them now would be cruel. Jack had an idea. What if we all move to my house? I have more space and it's further from the main street. It would be more discreet. Or we could be bolder, Dr. Franklin suggested thoughtfully. What if we confronted these people directly? Asked them why they're looking for the babies? Helen shook her head. Too risky. If they really have enough power to intimidate local shopkeepers, imagine what they could do to us. It was then that Sam had an idea that surprised everyone. What if we went to the church? Reverend Evans has known everyone in this town for 30 years. If anyone knows something about these babies' family, it's him. That's a good idea, Ellie agreed. And the church offers sanctuary, at least morally. Besides, Helen added, if we involve the religious community, it would be harder for these people to act openly. Dr. Franklin nodded slowly. Public opinion can be our best defense, but we need to be careful how we present the situation. While they discussed the options, the three babies remained surprisingly calm. It was as if, somehow, they understood they were being protected by people who genuinely loved them. You know, Helen said, watching the triplets, there's something almost magical about how they came to us. Each of us had something missing in our lives, and they filled that void. Sam nodded. Since Mary passed, this house was too quiet. Now, he looked around, seeing diapers drying on the makeshift line, bottles sterilizing on the stove, and 3 small borrowed cribs arranged in the living room. Now it's alive again. And I, Helen continued, was feeling lost, unsure if I'd chosen the right career. Caring for them showed me I was born for this. Ellie, who had remained quiet during the conversation, finally spoke. There's something I need to tell you about why I immediately recognized the baby's birthmarks. Everyone turned to her, sensing from her expression that it was important. When I worked at Blackwood Estates, I cared for a young woman who was pregnant. She hid the pregnancy from the family for as long as she could, but when she was finally discovered, Ellie paused, clearly disturbed by the memory. What happened? Helen asked softly. She was sent away. The family said she had dishonored the Blackwood name, but I knew she was pregnant with multiples. I heard the doctor talking about triplets. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Sam asked, "And what happened to her?" "No one knows. For sure. Officially, she went to study in Europe. But..." Ellie looked at the three babies. "I always wondered if she really left." The revelation completely changed everyone's perspective on the situation. These weren't just abandoned babies. They were possibly babies whose parents were also victims of a powerful family, willing to do anything to keep its reputation intact. "We need to find their mother," Helen said with determination. "If she's still alive, she has the right to know her children are safe. And if she's not," Dr. Franklin asked grimly. "Then," Sam said, looking at Gabriel, who had fallen asleep in his arms, "they have a new family that loves them unconditionally." At that moment, Gabriel opened his eyes again and, for the first time, smiled. It was a small, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable smile, the first smile of his young life. "Look," Helen whispered, "he's smiling." And it was in that moment that everyone knew, without a doubt, they would do anything to protect those three little miracles that had transformed their lives. The decision to seek out Reverend Evans was made that same afternoon. The pastor of the Havenwood Community Church had been a constant presence in the community for 3 decades, and his wisdom was respected even by those who didn't regularly attend services. Sam carried Gabriel in his arms, while Helen and Ellie carried Raphael and Hope. Dr. Franklin and Jack accompanied them, forming a united group that drew attention as they walked the town streets towards the church. Reverend Evans, a man of 57 with graying hair and an ever-present smile, was watering the flowers in the church garden when he saw them approaching. His expression changed from curiosity to concern when he noticed the babies. "Sam, my friend, what's going on here?" the pastor asked, wiping his hands on a cloth tucked into his waistband. "Reverend," Sam began, "I need to tell you a story that's going to sound impossible to believe." They went into the pastor's office, where Reverend Evans often counseled members of his congregation on personal matters. It was an intimate and safe environment, decorated with religious pictures and lit by the soft light filtering through stained glass windows. Sam told the whole story, from the moment he saw the man on the bridge to the discovery of the birthmarks and their suspicions. About the baby's identity, Reverend Evans listened in silence, occasionally asking specific questions, but mostly absorbing every detail with the attention he dedicated to the most important counseling sessions. "My goodness," the pastor murmured when Sam finished. "And you're sure they're from the Blackwood family?" "The birthmarks are unmistakable," Ellie confirmed, "and I saw them up close when I worked for them." Reverend Evans was silent for a long moment, looking at the 3 babies sleeping peacefully in the arms of their impromptu caregivers. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "There's something you need to know. Marcia Blackwood didn't go to study in Europe." The silence in the office became almost palpable. Helen was the first to find her voice. "What happened to her, Reverend?" "She came to me 4 months ago, desperate and afraid. She was pregnant and knew the family would reject her. I tried to intercede for her, but..." Reverend Evans shook his head sadly. "The Blackwood family's power extends even over matters of the church." "Where is she now?" Dr. Franklin asked. "In hiding, at a support home for single mothers in Oakhaven. I helped her get settled there, but I haven't heard from her since." The revelation changed everything. The babies weren't just abandoned children. They had a mother who probably didn't know if they had survived. "Reverend," Sam said, "I need to make a confession to you." Everyone in the room was surprised. Sam wasn't particularly religious, though he respected faith. Reverend Evans nodded, indicating he was ready to listen. "When I saw that man throwing those children into the river, I felt something I'd never felt before. A rage, a fury that scared me, but I also felt something stronger." Sam paused, looking at Gabriel in his arms. "I felt like God was testing me, giving me one last chance to do something truly important with my life." "And do you believe you passed the test?" Reverend Evans asked gently. "I don't know yet, but I know these babies changed not only my life but the lives of everyone here. And I know I can't let them go back to those who abandoned them like that. Reverend Evans nodded slowly. Sam, my friend, sometimes God puts us in situations where we have to choose between what is legally right and what is morally necessary. You saved 3 lives. That's not a sin, it's a miracle. Helen, who had remained quiet during the confession, finally spoke. Reverend, can you help us find the baby's mother? I can try to contact the support home in Oakhaven, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that she may not want or be able to care for them. Why? Asked Ellie. Because the Blackwood family has the resources to make life very difficult for anyone. Marcia might be too scared to take the babies, even if she desperately wants to keep them. Dr. Franklin, ever practical, asked the question everyone was thinking. And what if the family finds out where the babies are before we can resolve this legally? Reverend Evans looked around the group, seeing the determination in each face. Then you will have to decide how far you are willing to go to protect them. At that moment, as if sensing the seriousness of the conversation, little Hope woke up and began to cry. But it wasn't a cry of despair. It was the healthy cry of a baby who knew she would be comforted. Helen immediately began to soothe Hope, gently humming a lullaby she had learned in college. The melody echoed through the office, creating an atmosphere of peace amidst the storm of emotions. She has a lovely voice, Reverend Evans commented, smiling for the first time since they arrived. Helen has a natural way with them, Sam said. We've all discovered something about ourselves caring for these little ones. It's true, Jackie confirmed. I never thought I could feel so much love for children I only met 2 days ago. Reverend Evans observed the interaction between the caregivers and the babies with growing admiration. You know, he said, there's a passage in Scripture that says, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Perhaps God put these children in your lives not only to save them, but to save you as well. The pastor's observation resonated deeply with everyone present. Sam, who had lost his purpose since his wife's death, Helen, uncertain about her vocation, Ellie feeling useless in retirement, Dr. Franklin still wishing to make a difference even after retiring, Jack looking for meaningful ways to help his community. They had all found renewal through caring for the triplets. Reverend, Sam said, would you bless us and the babies? Reverend Evans smiled. It would be an honor. They formed a circle, each adult holding one of the babies, with Sam in the center holding Gabriel. Reverend Evans placed his hands over the group and offered a prayer that none of them would ever forget. Lord, bless these children who were saved from the waters as Moses was saved from the river. Give them strength to grow healthy and happy. And bless these adults who opened their hearts to love, showing that true family is not just blood, but choice. May their bond be strong enough to weather any storm that comes. When the blessing ended, there were tears in everyone's eyes. But they were tears of hope, not despair. And now? Helen asked. Now, Reverend Evans said with renewed determination, we're going to find these children's mother, and we're going to ensure that this whole family stays together. Outside the church, a dark car drove slowly down the main street. This time, it stopped for a few seconds in front of the church, the occupants clearly observing the unusual activity. The search was intensifying, but so was the determination of those who had committed to protecting Gabriel, Raphael, and Hope at any cost. 3 days after the blessing at the church, Reverend Evans brought the news everyone expected and feared. He had found Marcia Blackwood. She's alive, the pastor announced to the group gathered at Sam's house, but she's in shock. When she learned the babies were thrown into the river, she didn't believe they could have survived. Helen, who was feeding Hope, looked up with tear-filled eyes. Does she want to see them? She's scared, Reverend Evans admitted. The family threatened her life if she tried to claim the babies. They said she brought enough dishonor to the Blackwood name. Sam, who was holding Gabriel, the baby rarely left his arms now, felt the familiar surge of anger. What kind of family threatens its own daughter? A family that values reputation above love, Dr. Franklin replied grimly. Unfortunately, I've seen this before in powerful families. It was then that Jack came running in, a look of panic on his face. Folks, we have serious trouble. Richard Blackwood is in town. He's going from house to house, asking questions about the babies. The silence that followed was tense. Richard Blackwood was known for his violent nature and for solving family problems through intimidation. "How many men did he bring?" Dr. Franklin asked. "3. All armed, from what I could see." Helen hugged Hope tighter. "We can't face them directly. We have to leave town." "Where to?" asked Ellie. "They have the resources to find us anywhere." It was then that Sam had an idea that surprised everyone. "What if we didn't run? What if—" "We confronted them, but not alone." "What do you mean?" Reverend Evans asked. "I mean the whole town. If Richard Blackwood wants the babies, he's going to have to explain to the entire community why he abandoned them first." The idea was bold, but Dr. Franklin began to see its merit. "Are you suggesting a public confrontation?" "I'm suggesting we tell the truth to everyone. Let the town decide if it wants to support a family that abandons children or people who save them." Helen shook her head. "It's too risky, Mr. Peterson. What if the town doesn't support us?" "Then we'll face the consequences," Sam said with determination. "But at least we'll have given these children a chance at a decent life." Reverend Evans, who had remained thoughtful, finally spoke. "There's merit in Sam's idea. The truth has its own power, and if we present the facts clearly—" "I'm in," Jack said firmly. "This town has suffered enough from the Blackwood family's power. Maybe it's time to say enough." "And I," added Ellie, "would rather fight for these children than hide like a criminal." Dr. Franklin nodded slowly. "So how do we do this?" "The town fair is tomorrow," Reverend Evans said. "Everyone will be in the main square. It would be the perfect time." That night they prepared everything carefully. Helen wrote a clear summary of the facts. Dr. Franklin prepared medical documentation on the baby's condition when they were found. Jack organized witnesses who had seen Richards. Men asking intimidating questions, and Sam simply stayed awake all night, holding Gabriel, Raphael, and Hope alternately, whispering stories to them about the river, about Mary, about how sometimes people find family in the most unexpected places. The morning of the fair arrived cloudy, but without rain. The main square was bustling with vendors setting up stalls, families strolling, children playing. It was a normal Saturday in a small town, except for the 3 black cars parked strategically around the square. Richard Blackwood was a tall man, about 42, with the kind of good looks that come from privilege and expensive workouts. His suit was immaculate. His shoes gleamed, and his expression was that of someone used to being obeyed without question. Reverend Evans stepped onto the small platform normally used for town announcements. His voice, trained by decades of sermons, carried clearly across the square. "Townsfolk," he began, "today we have a situation that requires the wisdom of our community." The crowd gradually stopped their activities and turned towards the pastor. Sam, Helen, Ellie, Dr. Franklin, and Jack positioned themselves near the platform, each holding one of the babies. "A week ago, our friend Sam Peterson witnessed a crime. 3 newborn babies were thrown into the Willow Creek River, abandoned to die." A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. Richard Blackwood, who was near his limousine, visibly tensed. "Sam, moved by the compassion that defines our community, saved these 3 children. Since then, our entire town has come together to care for them." Reverend Evans paused, letting the information sink in. "But now, powerful people want to claim these children, the same people who abandoned them." Richard Blackwood began to walk towards the platform, his bodyguards flanking him. "Reverend Evans," he said in a loud, authoritative voice, "those children are the property of the Blackwood family. I demand they be returned immediately." "Property?" Sam's voice cut through the air. "Children aren't property, young man. They are blessings from God." "You don't understand who you're talking to, old man," Richard retorted contemptuously. "I can destroy your pathetic life with one phone call." It was then that something magical happened. Gabriel, who was in Sam's arms, began to cry. But it wasn't the weak cry of a week ago. It was the strong, healthy cry of a loved child. The sound touched something deep in the crowd. Mrs. Davis, the baker, was the first to speak. "I know the cry of hungry babies, Richard Blackwood, and I know the cry of loved babies. These children are being loved." "It's true," said the local blacksmith, a large, respected man. "The whole town has seen how these people care for these babies, day and night without rest." Richard looked around, sensing the crowd was not on his side. "You don't understand," he said, trying to regain control. "These children are illegitimate, a mistake that needs to be corrected." "The only mistake here," said a clear female voice, "was someone thinking they could get rid of my children." Everyone turned. A young woman of about 24 was walking towards the square. She was thin, clearly still recovering from childbirth, but her eyes shone with fierce determination. "Marcia," Richard whispered, his face paling. "Yes, brother. Marcia. The sister you tried to erase from existence along with my children." The crowd fell absolutely silent. Marcia Blackwood walked directly to Sam, who instinctively handed Gabriel to her. The moment Marcia held her son for the first time was transcendental. Gabriel stopped crying immediately, as if he recognized his mother. Tears began to stream down Marcia's face as she whispered words of love that only she and the baby could hear. "They're healthy," she said, looking at Helen and the others. "You saved my children." "Marcia," Richard said, trying to regain control, "you can't raise these children. You have no resources, no support." "She has an entire town of support," Sam interrupted, "and she has a chosen family that loves her." Dr. Franklin stepped forward. "Marcia, as a doctor, I can attest that you are a loving and capable mother. And as a citizen, I can attest that these children are better off with you and all of us than with anyone capable of abandoning them." The crowd began to murmur in agreement. Richard realized he was completely losing control of the situation. "You'll regret this," he said, attempting one last intimidation. "The Blackwood family has enough power to destroy this entire town." It was then that an unexpected voice was heard. "No, Richard, it doesn't." An elderly man, well-dressed but with an expression of deep sadness, was walking towards the group. It was Albert Blackwood, the family patriarch whom everyone thought was dead. "Dad," Richard was visibly shocked. "I thought you had died." "No, my son, though sometimes I wished I had, seeing what my family has become." Albert looked at the babies in Helen's and Ellie's arms. "Are these my grandchildren?" Marcia nodded, tears still streaming. "Yes, Dad. Gabriel, Raphael, and Hope." Albert approached slowly, extending a trembling finger that Gabriel immediately grasped. "They have the family mark," he said with admiration. "But more importantly, they have something our family lost a long time ago." "What's that?" Sam asked. "Unconditional love," Albert replied, looking around at the group of caregivers. "Something you gave them when their own family rejected them." Richard tried one last time. "Dad, these children are illegitimate. They'll stain the family name." "The family name is already stained, Richard. Stained by pride, by cruelty, by the inability to love." Albert turned to the crowd. "Citizens of this town, I ask for forgiveness in the name of the Blackwood family, and I ask that you accept my daughter Marcia and my grandchildren as part of your community." The response was immediate. Applause began to echo through the square, growing into an ovation that lasted several minutes. Reverend Evans returned to the platform. "Then it's settled. Gabriel, Raphael, and Hope Blackwood are officially citizens of this town, protected by all of us." "And what about their mother?" Helen asked. "Marcia will always be welcome in my home," Sam said. "Her and the children. We have plenty of room, and—" He looked at Helen, Ellie, Dr. Franklin, and Jack. "We have a family that already loves them." 6 months later, Sam's house had been completely transformed. An annex was built to accommodate Marcia and the babies, who were now chubby, healthy toddlers. Helen had moved to town permanently, establishing a small preschool. Dr. Franklin returned to practicing medicine part-time, specializing in pediatrics. Ellie became the children's official grandmother. And Jack discovered he had a natural talent for making wooden toys. Albert Blackwood had disinherited Richard completely, leaving the entire family fortune to Marcia and the triplets. But more importantly, he had moved into a small house in town, where he spent his days telling stories to his grandchildren and learning what it truly meant to be family. On a Sunday afternoon, Sam was sitting on his porch, holding Gabriel, now a chubby, smiling toddler, while watching Raphael and